Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Eleutheria, where we talk about all things liberty. And this afternoon, I have a guest with me. His name is Justus Kilian, and he runs a channel called Agenda 21 Truth, South Africa. And I thought that was quite interesting when I started watching it. And more, I'm seeing how lockdown regulations are possibly driven by a larger agenda. And I wondered if Justus agreed on that.
Well, yeah, I think it's easy for people to follow all this stuff, and I mean, in a broader way, not only looking at our local news, but in what's happening internationally. You can see that it is all the same things happening in all over the world. Um, they sometimes call them slightly different names, but it's exactly the same things. And some governments like ours, we have a saying in Afrikaans, die dam onder die eend uitdruk. Of course, our government is very good with doing that, going totally overboard with anything, usually in the complete wrong direction. But when it comes to sustainable development, um, which is the popularized name for Agenda 21, they are very good at sticking to that. That's basically all that gets done. If and if I say if it's not part of sustainable, it doesn't get done. That sounds kind of like a little bit of a contradiction, because sustainable development does cover everything that you can possibly think of in the government system, from energy and water to education and social programs, and it's an all-encompassing thing. But they're only spending budgets and creating policies in that under that one umbrella, directed by that one plan, under that blueprint. Nothing outside of that is even considered.
Yeah, so what exactly is Agenda 21 for people that are here that might not have heard of it? They've heard sustainable development, but they don't necessarily realize that this is something that has come from the UN. It's a globalized sort of policy.
Yeah,
Um,
it is a global one size fits all blueprint plan, development plan for the entire planet for the 21st century. It's a 100-year plan. A lot of people, I've heard it recently on a few other live streams and podcasts from Australia, and I can't remember the other country, where they said that it seems like, or they basically insinuated that the UN didn't reach their goals by the intended 2021, and now they've changed to Agenda 2030. That is just incorrect. There was never a 2021 target date for completion of this whole thing. It was always a 100-year plan for the 21st century. That's why there's a 21. So we've got another 70 years or so to go of this before they I don't know, are going to do another review and have another 100-year plan, I guess. But they there are certain very fundamental things that they want achieved by 2030. Another target date would be 2050, and or thereabouts. You see in some they've changed our government system from what we used to have to something called regionalism or regional government. So you'll see in some regions, like the Tshwane metropolitan region, which is basically Joburg and Pretoria and some surrounding areas, that they have their own plan for that region, the Tshwane 2055 plan. So by that target date, there are certain things that need to be accomplished, but it doesn't stop there. It still continues for the century. So it's a very long-term plan, and it does come from the United Nations. I'm just going to read you a post here that I made on my Facebook page that I started in 2012. It was one of the very first ones in November. that was sort of meant to give an overview of what Agenda 21 was. And there's just one small paragraph that I want to read from it. You can read the whole thing if you want yourselves later. But the UN Agenda 21 is the action plan to inventory and control all land, all water, all energy, all minerals, all construction, all plants, all animals, all means of production, all information, and all human beings in the world. Inventory and control, and that is what it is. That's why you would have seen in some of my videos a lot of talk about digital IDs, and that the health passport and immunity passport ideas that have been floated there is technology that combine all three of those in one thing, but it's inventorying and control of humans.
And that's when you mentioned that. I forget which show you were on last week. It was either Ramon or Germ show that where you mentioned specifically that, and I was like, this is a topic for Eleutheria because Eleutheria is about liberty, and basically what they want to do is curtail our liberties.
Yes.
By the sounds of things.
Yes, and the argument is basically if you just let people do what they want, it's going to destroy the planet. But very fundamentally to it is the idea that any sort of development, any the traditional or things that historically pulled us through the industrial revolutions and got us to the point where we are today, all the technology and all that is simply in their eyes not sustainable. So we're going to have to find other ways to do it. And the thing is, the ways that they've decided what those ways are. And you'll see our policies and our budgets are directed to that. I don't want to talk about this too much because with German, I got cut off by load shedding, so I want to continue that on his show later. But briefly, the Cape Town water crisis, for instance, we started talking about that and then we got cut off. There's a lot to say about it, but the Agenda 21 plan itself, the framework agreement from 1992, if you scan that PDF of over 400 pages, and you must remember the context of this is that it is supposed to be the development plan for the entire century. If you scan that document for the word dam or dams, it comes up twice. And one of them is not casting it in a very good light. So one of them is basically telling you that it's not such a great idea. But what it does suggest is things that you've heard before. Desalinization, grey water reuse, groundwater use. And while none of those things are on its own a bad thing necessarily, the fact that all your budgets and policies are directed only to that, and we're not building dams anymore, because that is now bad for the planet. And if you listen to some of the arguments that even our local so-called hydrologists make is that we can't build more dams, not only because there's no space and they're environmental disasters, absolute disasters. I don't know how many of you have been to dams. The wildlife seem to disagree with that most of the time. I know there are local pollution issues and stuff that happen from time to time, but the idea that dams are by default just environmental disasters is laughable. But my point is just, while water reuse and other means of providing water is not on their own necessarily bad, the problem is you're not allowed to look outside of it at all. So we're not building dams. What I wanted to say about the hydrologists, the laughable point is their last one is we can't build more dams because of climate change. It's going to be too hot now, so too much of the water is going to evaporate. I kid you not.
Okay, but surely, look, I'm not a hydrologist. I'm not a conservationist. All I know is basic science that I learned in.
Are not going to evaporate like the dams, you know.
Yeah. This is the other thing. But I know dams don't just like evaporate dry
Well,
because
they can, I guess, but to use that as a reason for why we can't build any more dams, it's just,
no.
I, but yeah, let's talk about something
Well,
else.
my husband likes going to Sterkfontein Dam. He quite likes that dam. Um, he hasn't been able to catch any fish there yet, but we do enjoy going there on holiday, and it is a lovely piece of nature, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, even the Hartbeespoort Dam, which is, I wouldn't say clean, it
No.
is there is pollution there, but go look at the wildlife there in
Hmm.
that area and surroundings, and uh, tell me if they think it's an absolute environmental disaster, and where would they be living if there was no dam? Where would they be then?
Mm, exactly. Yeah. I think, especially in a water crisis, we should be looking at all of our options,
Yeah, and that's the problem.
not.
And the other concept that people can find easily in their own local governments and municipalities and regional plans, um, is the term demand management, and that is, or demand side management, and that is not only applicable to water, it's also applicable to uh, energy and even
Mm,
transport, and basically everything that we use. um, the concept of managing the demand instead of increasing the supply, because increasing the supply is also bad for the planet.
mm,
They call it irresponsible. We have to develop responsibly, which means in a way that people can't afford to live, and that where they don't have any freedom, that's responsibly.
yeah, so basically they want to tell us how to live, where to live, and how much to consume of everything. We're talking food,
Look,
paper, everything.
yeah, and if you, I read a, I think it was USA Today, a fact-checking article in the last week about this Agenda 21 and 2030, and obviously they can then just make up their own, what they call them, allegations or claims. They can just, oh,
Hmm.
people claim this, and meantime, but anyway, they debunk this agenda and they say no, but this encourages sovereignty and national individual states staying in touch with their own affairs. But the reality of the situation is, and if you read on Wikipedia too, it will say that it's a voluntary, non-binding agreement. But the reality is that you don't sign something on that scale and that encompassing with governments, especially if it's not in any way binding. You could
Mm,
just pass a resolution in the United Nations, and we'll try really, really hard to all just keep to this list of rules. But no, it was a very, very formally signed document. And if you read
mm,
it, and not only that, the other documents that flow out of it, and the updated versions of it, was the Millennium Development Goals, which then became Agenda 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals that we have now. Um, they use words that is not consistent with voluntary in any way, like obligations and commitments, and that it is expected of of your country to do certain reporting on your
mm,
progress. It's uh, look, if you want to see an example of where someone exercised the voluntary aspect of this whole agenda, it was Donald Trump withdrawing from the Paris Accord. And what happened after that?
oh, there
How?
was such total outrage.
Yeah.
He was
Right.
shamed,
So it's
and
completely voluntary then.
yeah, yeah, no, it's 100% voluntary. But if you don't sign up for it, then you get shamed and hate gets spewed at you and the country that you represent. And
Yeah, and the
um,
reality of how this has happened is that that agreement was signed, and at the time, although it was reported in the news and stuff, there was no real critical analysis of it, really, not very
mm-mm,
much. And people still to this day, almost 30 years later, have to ask me, what is Agenda 21? Like,
mm,
and what has happened is national policies have incorporated, if you can, Jacob Zuma, I think it was, even made a statement somewhere that our national development plan is basically 70% sustainable development goals, or Agenda 2030. But it's because since 1996 to 1998 is when it really started to pick up speed big time in our country. Uh, they have just aligned our national policy documents, like the National Development Plan, with those goals already. So now it is in your national policies, and it is local policies also get introduced from the bottom up through an
mm,
NGO called ICLEI. And there are others. There are quite a few of these NGOs that function basically exclusively to introduce local, they call it local Agenda 21, into local
mm,
governments. And the two meet sort of in the middle. The local government has to harmonize with the national policy that is basically derived from the Sustainable Development Goals. So you tell me, how voluntary is that? Where did we ever have an opportunity to vote against this? Because the other thing is that it's also not only the ANC, and it's not only our country. It's also the DA, and every single other opposition party that is in parliament will have somewhere one of these ICLEI or other NGO trained people making sure that it is in that party's policies to some degree at least. And that's the same in other countries. You can't vote against this because well, there are a few exceptions, but hardly ever, because they all support this. Even if some parties oppose certain aspects of it, there's something they don't understand. I unfortunately didn't find the link before we went on, but there's something that you can possibly search for right now if people are listening, just opening another tab, something called the Global Compact, South Africa, and put in the word Agenda 2030 and Sustainable Development Goals. And it's a PDF of some of our largest companies um, uh, reporting on how they are supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, if you read the preface to that document, it says to you that these things are indivisible. You can't pick and choose the parts that you want. You'll see what the companies do in there. It's projects like projects that sound extremely novel, like providing mosquito nets here or wherever to curb malaria. Great, but you can't pick and choose the little parts because that you see supports some global health goal of sustainable development. So that's how they now, with the mosquito nets, they are now supporting that sustainable development goal, but you're also supporting all the others. You can't just stick your
mm,
name on one of them.
mm. Yeah, it, I mean, as soon as you start buying into it, it, you get, you very easily fall down the rabbit hole of buying into everything and doing everything. And just one moment. I'm sorry about that. I can't ever get through a single stream without being interrupted.
It's all right.
Um, so why is it called Agenda 21 if the goal is that it's done by 2050 or whatever?
It's this plan for the 21st century.
Oh, it's the 21st century, which is what we're in now. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot that you had mentioned that before.
Yeah.
Um, I just want to see if there's any comments or questions from the audience. I know that 21 was one.
Yeah, I see the comment there on your screen. That's right. 20, well, this thing was signed in 1992. Um, 2050 is an important target date, and that's why I mentioned the 2055 earlier. But it's not. It's still not the end. The African Union, we're talking about a new governance structure here, okay, of regionalism. I've also mentioned that a few minutes ago.
Mm.
Regionalism is things like the African Union, SADC. I don't know how many people have checked elsewhere in Africa. There are other groupings like SADC. There's the West African one and the East African one. So that's regionalism. And the African Union regionalist plan is called Vision 2063. And a lot of them, a lot of these regional plans have the word vision in them. That's the Trani plan from that I mentioned earlier is also Vision 2055. If you live in a big metro, you can just, again, open another tab, type Vision 2030 Cape Town or Vision 2030 Johannesburg. Johannesburg actually has another one called GDS 2040, Growth and Development Strategy 2040, which is also a harmonized plan with Agenda 21 or Sustainable Development. So the African Union one goes to 2063. I don't know, like the smaller regional ones, I haven't checked yet, but they probably will harmonize with the African Union one. So I doubt that 2050 is the end of it, but it is an important date. 2030 is also very important. By that time, they want most of us living in smart cities and most of people out of rural areas.
Why?
Because it'd be bad for the planet is their sales pitch, but the practical reason is that this is an inventory and control agenda, and it's much easier to inventory and control everyone if they are in a smaller area, concentrated in a smaller area, and to surveil everything that they do. Because the 5G network rollout that we're seeing now is a very intricate, it's a very important part to this 2030 goal, because they want everything, most of the things rationed and very strictly controlled resources, I mean, by that time. So the 5G network greatly enhances the capability of governments to do this, because they can place many, many more cameras and scanners and sensors everywhere than they can now.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be built into the smart cities. It is not something, and there are a couple of smart city projects going on in the country now. They've been going on for years. One big one here on the, what is it, sort of East Randish of Joburg, failed because of, it's funny, it was a Chinese investment, and they eventually pulled the plug on it when I last checked. I don't know what has happened since, but they pulled the plug or they pulled out the Chinese contingent because they didn't want to comply with one of the other conditions or policy ideals of sustainable development, which is inclusionary housing, which compels developers to have a certain, new developers must have a certain percentage. I think it's 25% of the development must be what they call inclusionary housing, which is basically going to be the smart city maids' quarters. Okay.
Okay.
Just so let's just call it what it is. But
Mm.
that is why they pulled out, funnily enough. They didn't want to comply with that. Maybe they didn't read the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, so why do we need to
Maybe
be
they,
worried about it?
or maybe they thought they'd get an exemption like the Chinese get with everything else surrounding sustainable development. But obviously the surveillance aspect and control aspect is already very much part of their society. So they comply very well with that. Actually, they're leaders on
Mm.
that front. But with other things, if they feel like giving the UN the finger, they just do, because I think they are at this stage basically to a large extent in control of much of what happens at the UN anyway. So
Mm. So why do we need to worry about it? What, like, a lot of people, I think, in the name of development, in the name of progress and everything like that, people have slowly but surely been giving up their civil liberties. Um, and now we're sitting in a basically a police state. We're locked down. We still have a curfew, which I know you're opposed to. So that's great. Um, you know what? Why do we think this is something to worry about? I mean, I know why I worry about it, but
Well,
I
we've
want to
seen
hear it
how
from you.
quickly and suddenly our lives have changed from just January, February this year. Everything was still normal, and now look what we have now. And this is just a taste of it, but this is what they want permanently: control over your movement and exactly what you can buy and where you can buy. And that the digital ID is going to facilitate that. It will have the ability to decide or the system will decide where you can buy, what you can buy, how much of it you can buy. Uh, I did a video on my channel about carbon currency, uh, and this idea has been coming since the early 2000s already. And I cite an article from the Independent from 2005 or six, I think, where uh, the British, I forget his position now, but it was David Miliband, gave a speech about, I think it's Secretary of the Environment and something else. Anyway, he put out the plan or the idea then that people must be able to pay for things like air travel and electricity and fuel with carbon credits. And, it says in the article, and cash. Um, but the idea that when once your carbon credits, which is a ration, you get a ration, certain
Mm,
amount allocated to you, and once they run out, you have to buy more. And I explain how they create these carbon credits, basically pushing people off the land, and they plant forests, and these forests supposedly offset the carbon dioxide that we produce just because we're alive and do things that doesn't involve rocks and sticks. And now because of that, there's carbon that needs to be offset, and that is how, they throw you off the land, plant trees, and then that's how they offset the carbon. And then you have to buy these credits. You have to buy more of them if yours run out. So if that sounds like a fun life to you, then don't worry about it. But I would say that's a pretty good reason to worry about it. There's
mm.
also, I will use this video in one of my later videos. It's been removed from YouTube a lot, but luckily thousands of people have kept on reposting it. It's called Plandopolis. And it's like
Plandopolis.
yeah, I think it's a 4-minute video or so, maybe less, um, where it's one of these sustainable development mongering NGO things that is giving us now visions into the future, possible scenarios of how we can live by adapting to climate change. And there's a World Food Council. There's, if you want to get a ride, you have to book one on your smart app, and it tells the person, you sort of have a tour guide taking you through the smart city, and they tell you, no, there are no cars anymore. That's only for rich people. It's like, so um, if that sounds like fun, then go watch Seven Delon.
Yeah, um, I can't imagine like billions of people living in skyscrapers all the time. I can't imagine how that is healthy for humans.
Yeah, well, that is one of the ways in which they plan to when I say use population control in this sense, is the numbers. Control the numbers is by having
Mm,
us breed less. Um, and if you look at some of the uh, sustainable uh, developments in the Cape Town area, for instance, I've talked about this before. There's one called the Rockefeller. I don't know how far it is now. It might be complete. I don't know. I haven't read about it in 2 years or so. But um, basically, the price of these units would have been the same as I paid for my freestanding house in Joburg with a
mm,
large yard. But it's the apartment sizes ranges from 25 to 45 square meters.
Good grief.
Yeah.
I
How do
have
you
three
raise two?
kids. So
How do you raise
I'm
two
just,
kids in that, or even one?
yeah, no, I just, no, no.
But yeah, so they've got what they call a desired urban form under the United Nations Habitat Program, which is also part of the overall Sustainable Development Plan. And anything that's being done in cities have to conform to this desired urban form.
Mm. So how do we fight back against it?
You don't comply with it. So once, most of the time, when the teeth of this start hitting your policies and programs in your area, it almost invariably annoys people. But
Mm,
they well, I think I can freely say never. They never know that all these things are actually coming from the same place, and that's what I'm trying to do, is to show people that it all
mm,
comes from the same place. There are many ways in which you can just refuse to cooperate with it. One example is the ETAG story in Gauteng, which always
mm.
had the flaw of that people had to voluntarily give their phones up.
Oh no, it would appear that we've lost Justus.
Go get a tag and register, fill in the forms. If people hear you, there you are.
Yeah, you broke up and buffered a bit, and then you sped up, and now you're back.
Okay. I can't remember
So
where I was. Okay,
e-tax
so said
relied on people
I'm
actually
compliant.
participating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a similar thing with smart meters, installing them. I know that in some places they're very aggressive and they threaten you in all sorts of ways, but there are there are ways to delay and agitate and frustrate this as long as possible. With the very important one of the very important things that is being introduced now with the pandemic response is the tracking and tracing of contact tracing with cell phones. So I started a campaign a while ago on Facebook, and I haven't punted it enough. But so there's not a lot of people following it yet. It's called Phone Free Fridays, where I
Mm-hmm.
want people to just for one day. I'm not saying you mustn't use your phone. Use your phone if you must. Make the calls, check your messages, do your Facebook, whatever. But try and maybe leave it in one room for a day, or
Yes.
put it in a cupboard or something. Just
Yeah.
because that'll also make them come out very hard and show the agenda very clearly. They're going to have to demand that people carry their phones with them, and then you're just carrying a pass, aren't you? You're just
Mm.
back in Dompa's land. So Phone Free Fridays is meant for that purpose. I know I don't take my phone to the shops anyway. I know a lot of people are already because they've heard this now for months about
Yes.
tracking and tracing on phones. So I know a lot of people are already doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever possible, sometimes I use one of my phones or some of my phones as a camera, and then I have to take them with me. But I don't, as a rule, uh, take my phone out with me anymore.
Does it make a difference if you don't have a SIM card in your phone?
I don't know. I'd rather just not take it. I have
No,
other
I'm
stuff to
just
do.
trying to think of, in when you're using your phone as a camera, if
Mhm.
you put it on airplane mode or something, if that
I
makes a
do that
difference.
anyway. I
Okay.
do that anyway to conserve battery, but I don't know if it actually does something.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Um, and what are because didn't you mention three campaigns in your latest video?
Yeah, so there are two others, which is what concerned me about the whole drive for a vaccine that the media and government, for me at least, is clearly trying to create a perception that is not true. And that is the perception that everyone just wants this vaccine. And it's going to be such a logistical nightmare getting it to everyone once one is finally available. And how are we going to fairly distribute this so that, rich people don't just get all the vaccines and then there's nothing left for the poor people. It's just not true. So I started one, and Ramaphosa also uh, issued a letter together with, I think, 7 other world leaders calling for global solidarity in this fair distribution of the vaccine. And so I started a campaign called South African Donating Their Vaccines in Global Solidarity. So that people, I want people, even if they do nothing else, to just go like the page if they understand what this is about, because I actually do want to make a list. It is a list. You're putting your name on a list if you like that Facebook page, that you are willing to make Cyril's job a little bit easier so that he doesn't have to stress so much about who's going to get the vaccine.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. I'll donate all 6 people that live in this
Yeah,
house's
I've also got 4.
vaccines.
I've also got 4 for him to donate. So I'm sure now the thing is, we're not supposed to believe that there are a bunch of poor people in South Africa sitting, yay, we're going to get vaccines. That's also rubbish. Most of them also don't want the stuff because they don't trust it. And there's very good reason to not trust it. The other
Yeah,
one, what was,
yeah. Okay, your
yeah,
third campaign.
no, you can go on. I'm thinking what it is. I forgot now.
No, I
um,
think a lot of them had some damage done to their babies getting infected blisters from the BCG vaccine. So I think
yeah.
there is enough skepticism in
The
terms
point
of,
I'm ultimately trying to make with this list is that they want to try, I know they want to try and mandate it. They want to have some form of mandate, even if it is just a mandate a soft mandate, where they say, we're not going to come to your door and give it to you. But if you don't have it and it's not on your COVID pass on your phone registered, then you can't go to Sun City or any other fun place.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah. So
yeah, you can't go to
I know
Gold Reef
that's
City for the day or,
I know that's
things
what they
like
want to do, and I want us to force them out into the open earlier if we can, in that way. Um, and actually, if you read our National Disaster Management Act, I posted a short blog about this earlier this week. It actually does seem to make provision for forced vaccination already. It says in there that no one may refuse to be treated with a prophylactic, which is what a vaccine is. So beware, nobody may refuse.
Yes, I know. That came out pretty early
Yeah,
that
that's
they would be
April.
forcing the treatment that they want to give you.
The very concerning thing here is that the companies making or mass producing these things, it has been in the news in Europe. I haven't seen it here yet, and in other places around the world too, mainstream news, that the companies, uh, pharmaceutical companies, don't want to sign these agreements if they are not exempt from legal liability, or if they're not exempt from consequences of people getting hurt. So
Yes.
they want exemption that you can't sue them, then they will supply you. So uh, if people are comfortable with that being a mandatory thing that you can't refuse, then I need to move.
Yeah, mandatory vaccine when the pharmaceutical companies have immunity uh, just leaves it open for unsafe
Yes.
vaccines to flood the
And
market because they
with the
don't have
previous
to.
swine, yeah, with the previous swine flu pandemic in 2009, there
Yes.
was actually 800 plus children in Europe that did get permanent brain damage from that vaccine, and they were in Ireland. The families were recently compensated £1 million each for it, and it also was found later that the thing, I forget the name of the vaccine now, but it caused narcolepsy and cataplexy. Or cataplexy is where your muscles just go limp suddenly,
Mm.
and narcolepsy in, I think it was 1 in 16,000 people or something. I did reference the article in some of my videos too, but it's not like these things we can see that it has caused damage already, and now they
mm,
want further legal liability, or
yeah,
you know what I mean. They want to be exempt from
yes.
any consequences. So, oh, and the other
And
thing is, even now with these payouts that the people received, the government's going to give them the money back. So the taxpayers are paying for the damage, actually.
yes, ultimately it's the taxpayers that end up paying for it. Um, and before we start sounding like complete anti-vax nuts, that's not the message we're trying to bring across here. We're saying, and just because it's only one, it's only 1 in 16,000. Like really,
Yeah, who cares?
you know what? When it's your 1 in 16,000, when it's your husband that falls asleep behind the wheel and gets into a head-on collision,
If there
that
are,
means
if there is, if there's a bowl with 100,000 M&Ms in there, and I tell you that just one of them will definitely kill your child if he eats it, will you let him stick his hand in there and take one?
no.
I won't either.
I'm
So,
saying person would.
especially if I tell you he has to take one, right? You're not going to be happy if I tell you he has to take one of them and eat them.
Yeah. So then we're gonna sit and watch 1,000 kids and see which one gets the poisonous
Yeah,
one.
let's see. Hmm.
Yeah.
Who's the
No.
lucky one? So no, people need to understand that this is not just a blanket "I'm anti-vaccine" thing. I believe in learned immunity. That's how the immune system works. My personal opinion is that we don't need to trick the immune system for every single freaking pathogen that is out there. We can take care of some of it ourselves, including this one. If you look at the survival rate,
Absolutely.
how can people claim we had no immunity to this if 99 point what is it 99.7% of people who tested positive for this thing survive?
Exactly. And
uh, Sometimes our immune systems can work. So
yes, they do work. And yeah, it's definitely not as deadly as we were first led to believe. So yeah, we
and Bill
just
Gates said Bill Gates, the vaccine baron, now tells us, as deadly as this was, climate change is going to be worse. So
so now they're
uh,
getting back onto that one.
we are getting back onto climate change. People should
Gosh.
actually. I also put a blog out about this. I actually just reposted the article, put it in the blog post. It's on my Facebook page, uh, the Agenda 21 Truth Facebook page. Just on the 24th, the president's newsletter from the president's desk. You guys must go read that, please. The script completely flipped from COVID to climate change. The whole thing is just climate change. Go read it.
Again. Okay.
The whole script just flipped and it just smoothly went by.
I will definitely go and give that a look. And I'll remind everybody that all of the links to your Facebook page, your Twitter, and your YouTube channel are in the description. So if you're watching live now, the live chat will be open. Just close that if you're on your phone, and you'll see the links there, and you'll be able to go give Justus a follow there. Um, I have quite a few people from the gun community that like watching me. And we didn't quite manage to find a way to segue into the agenda behind guns, but it is pretty much a United Nations agenda to
So I'm
disarm
going to
people.
read you something that I just looked up quickly before we started. Um, People can also search for it quickly, if and it's just to make one quick point. Really, I'm not going to. You can go look into this deeper yourself later. But
Mm,
if you think that gun control programs across the planet uh, is not influenced by this agenda, and our minister, one of our ministers, has even said that it is, for Kilian when he was Minister of Police. But let's move on. You can search for something on a UN website. The title of it is Program of Action on Small Arms and its International Tracing Instrument. Program of Action on Small Arms and its International Tracing Instrument. And it's from the Office for Disarmament Affairs of the United Nations. The second paragraph says in 2005, they also adopted the International Tracing Instrument, which requires states to ensure that weapons are properly marked and that records are kept. Moreover, it provides a framework for cooperation in weapons tracing, fulfilling one of the commitments governments made in the Program of Action. Improving weapons tracing is now part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Okay, so I'm not pulling it out of my ear if I say gun control is also now a component. And I'm just saying that because this is one of the hardest things for our gun community to accept, is that it is not the South African government being
Mm.
this stupid on their own.
Mm.
They're doing well, but it's not them. The buck doesn't stop with them.
No. I like how you described them on Germ's show, how the ANC ties into this, where you called them willing whores.
Yeah, but it is what they are, and the largest opposition parties are also. And I must say, I've never been a big voter. I don't, because to me, there's never been a real clear, distinctive choice that is going to be much different to any of the others. But I did participate in the last one, and I voted for the Freedom Front for two main reasons. Because they are not completely lip-tarded and into victimhood ideology, and because of their stance on self-determination and hopefully secession. But if they, after this, do not distance themselves from the United Nations, because they keep on appealing to the United Nations for their drive for self-determination, and I don't see why that's needed at all.
Mm.
Secession doesn't come from the United Nations. We've had this concept forever. If they don't distance themselves totally after this absolute catastrophe to the planet because of the Sustainable Development Agenda, if they don't distance themselves, they will never, ever get any help from me ever again in any form. Never mind a vote.
Mm. I agree with you on that one. It's very hard to find a party that's worth voting for, um, especially in the municipal elections. I'm like,
Yeah, luckily, I think things are, well, a lot of people firstly can see that there's something massively wrong,
mm,
even though all of them might not know what it is right now. But we're working on that. And
mm-hmm,
there is at least one party that I know of that is registered that is explicitly against this. They haven't been on the ballot yet. You may have heard about it in my other videos too, and it's Lauren Evanthia's party, the Organic Humanity Movement, and
yes.
that is the only party I know of that explicitly opposes this. So that's the only option if you want to vote against this, if they are on the ballot so far. Maybe some other parties come to their senses, but I don't see it happening. They are too scared of what's going to happen to our electorate. They really think that there is no one out there except you and I and a few people on my channel that are opposed to the United Nations. They really have this perception, the parties, I mean, the political parties, really think, and I know a lot of them get funding from them in various ways, but it's not only that. They really do believe that, oh, we can't say anything bad about the United Nations. What are our voters going to think? You're going to gain voters too. You're not only going to lose them. So parties need to decide if they are on the United Nations side or if they are on our side. I know of one party that are on our side.
Yeah. Well, I guess we just got to talk about it more and louder.
Yeah.
Um, Paul Hart would like to know if lockdowns are part of Agenda 21.
Yeah, and in this sense, it's at this stage, at least, it's much more to do with training people to be compliant. And I'm of the opinion, if you look at some of the international media, some of the leaders have let it slip that the IMF loan conditions included things like lockdowns and isolation, so like these sort of policies that we've excelled in once again, that we've excelled in over the last few months. And although I don't necessarily think they want a permanent state of that, what they do want is a permanent state of people sitting when the government says sit. That is what they want, and that
Yes.
is what they're training
Yes.
right now. They want to, they are training and demonstrating to the globalist bodies outside of our country how well they can control and how easy it, how compliant we are. So every day that goes by that we comply with rubbish like masks and you can't buy without a mask, and with rubbish like curfews, is a success, is a tick in the book. Sit, ooh. Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah, and like you said on one of the other streams you were on, them the alcohol ban and the cigarette ban and stuff like that, they would test it.
I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure they're going to bring, if not both of them, at least one of them back, and
Mm.
they'll play with it. Yeah, it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it's really just to see how well you tap dance.
Yeah, well, I mean, look how easily the entire nation was distracted as soon as the ban was lifted. Oh, yay, let's go out and stockpile. All
Yeah,
everything's
because
good, and I'm like,
one
we still have
contradiction,
a curfew.
one thing that
We
seems contradictory, for example, is that we're wearing masks and being forced to wear masks when the World Health Organization has said for a long time that it's not the thing to do. But what we are doing is demonstrating compliance, and that's what they really want. So we're doing
well,
very well with that.
what they did is they went after businesses.
Mm.
They
And they'll do
promised
that
that
with
they
the,
would fine the businesses if the businesses didn't impose it.
yeah. And it's I had my hair cut yesterday, and I had this conversation with my hairdresser, and she's also like, I know this is jumping in the fire when the government says jump in the fire, but I have to run a business, and they're going to do that with the digital IDs and vaccine passports and immunity passports too. So how many businesses, how far will they go in complying with all of this? I don't know. But it's one reason why I'm also a big advocate of, uh, if you can see how deep the trouble is and how serious it can be in the not too far future, then I am a big advocate of starting as many as possible independent communities, uh, just living in more rural settings, out of the smart cities, out of the major surveillance zones, so that when something like this happens again, you can just sort of carry on with your normal life. And it doesn't mean you all have to be suddenly garden workers or farm. I mean, we're going to need teachers who can farm and shoot, engineers who can farm and shoot, dentists who can farm and shoot, doctors and nurses, and all those people who can farm and shoot, and uh, build a small school. And it can be I'm still developing a model for this, but I'm thinking of things like maybe 5 to 8 to maybe 10 families on one farm, but also with other farms like that in the area, forming the complete community, so that it's little islands of communities spread all over the country. And there has to be a lot of them. There has to be thousands of them, because the first question people ask me is, well, won't they come after those places? Of course they will, but if there are thousands of them, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. We can just
So
build
that's what I'm going
structured
to focus on with my
systems.
family. That's all I'm saying. I'm not staying in the city. I'm done. I can now do my work that I'm currently doing basically anywhere as long as I have an internet connection. So there's no reason for me to stay in the city. My wife has been working distance now for all this time, this whole lockdown. So obviously she can carry on her job like this if they will allow it. She works for a large tourism company, so I don't even know how long that's still going to be around. But the point is just, if you really want to, there are ways to make a plan to do it, withdraw from the
Yes.
city. And I know a lot of people are doing it already. I was just, and even if they don't know why, uh, I was at a friend of mine's shop earlier in the week. It's in a quite a big nursery complex, and there were several people there. I could hear them talking to other sales reps and stuff, at least two other couples, And then at one other place, I went to another couple talking about how they're buying things to set up their own growing hydroponic system at home because they're planning to move out of the city and into the country. And the one was going to do beekeeping, and the one was going to plant strawberries. And so the people already can see this ain't working, and they're right.
That's
And the thing is, you can. It's one thing people must remember is some people will love this. Some people will love the smart cities, and some of them will want to be there. And I don't even want to waste time on that anymore. If that's what they want, then they must. My oupa het gesê as jy nie wil hoor nie, moet jy voel. So I'm
mm.
I'm going.
Yeah, I've actually been looking into the idea of being like digital nomads for a long time. Now, I'm not so keen on the nomad idea. I'm more interested in having a nice small holding far away from everybody else, but part of
And
a
you can have
community of like-minded people.
if you have and if you have several farms in an area that participate in something like that, you can work together to greatly improve your safety. With Because we have technology now that we can function outside of the system with to a large degree, and we can use this technology to make it much safer for everyone if you have a group security plan that everyone knows and participates in. So is it really safer in the city than it is on a farm? Because I don't know where people get that perception. You can literally, how many things have we, articles and stories have we seen over the last few years of a parent that someone that accidentally gets shot in front of a school? This can happen in any of us major cities. It can happen anywhere at any time. You can be attacked literally anywhere at any time. I don't know why people think it's safer in the cities, especially if you're not moving into the country on your own.
Mm.
If you're not going alone, it's, you know, anyway, let's talk about something more happy. Oh, we can't.
No, not yet. But we can leave on a happy note of that there are people that want to do this, that can have each other's backs, and that we can watch out for each other, even if we are in small holdings and further apart from each other than what we are in the city. And
Mm.
I think that's definitely something to work towards, is to absolutely revolt, as Paul Hart has said in his comment that I brought up, against all of this in
It
in
is
small
the
ways. It builds up.
it is one of the best ways to also work upstream to this agenda, to absolutely work against the flow, is to move out of the smart cities and not into them, because that is how all the incentives and everything is set up at the moment, is to draw people into cities. If you can do it exactly the opposite, that is one of the best ways to counter this agenda too.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. Any parting shots you want to
No,
share?
not really. People can just they can follow everything I put out, goes through the Facebook page, whether it's a blog or a video or just sharing an article and writing a little bitchy note about it. Everything goes out through the Facebook page first. And I'm on Twitter, and I am trying to now put out more regular videos. I've got a couple in the can, so next few days I'm trying to shoot another 3. So YouTube channel and Facebook page will probably be the most active places.
Great. And Chad has one last question. Jokes aside, question for Justus: does he believe the planet's resources are infinite, and if not, who should have access to those resources?
I don't think they are infinite. They're obviously not infinite, but one thing that we must remember, as I said earlier, the more we develop, the more sustainable we become. We become much more efficient in how we use resources. One example would be, I don't know exactly when the concern started, but long ago. I think it was before I was born even. There was a concern that we're going to run out of copper
Mm,
because of all the telephone lines that we have to cover the planet with. Um, and other lines, electricity lines and blah, blah. So we were going to run out of copper. But what today for our preferred means of communication almost for everyone these days is for themselves and for businesses is fiber internet, right?
Mhm.
And we don't make fiber cables from copper anymore. We find substitutes. We become more efficient. We uh, example someone I know, Leon Lowe from the Free Market Foundation, used is that the old Europeans didn't preserve their peat bogs for us, but we sort of we came out okay on the other side because we improve things. We find better ways to do things. So no, the resources are not infinite, but human ingenuity is almost infinite. So I'd rather give that a chance than the United Nations.
Absolutely. I think time and time again, humanity has come up with ways to combat problems that we've been faced with. And quite often, if we just leave it up to people and not bureaucrats or organized bureaucratic organizations, we generally get it right. So,
Yeah, and this is a special type of bureaucratic organization. This is filled with dictators and despots and former Nazis. It's just the idea that we even belong to this is kind of sickening to me. But the other point is, how do you ever hold anyone there accountable, and how do they get elected to those positions? How do they get there, and how do you get rid of them? It's hard enough to get rid of anyone in the ANC. Now we want to follow the agenda of this organization, the United Nations, that is an absolutely planet consuming monstrosity. How are you going to get rid of those people ever? Or
yeah.
hold anyone accountable?
Yeah, I think it's
No,
very important to bear in mind that they're not elected. They're in those positions because they're connected, not elected, and because their positions align with the
and their
organization.
ideologies. Yeah.
Yes, their ideologies. That's it. Okay,
So, yeah,
we've
go
gone
ahead.
over an hour. Did you want to say anything else?
No, I'm good.
Okay, great. All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Eleutheria, where we talk about liberty. And this afternoon, we sort of segued over to Agenda 21 and how that's affecting our liberties. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like and subscribe and leave comments and all that good stuff because it does help the content be spread further. Have a good one. Stay safe out there. Don't wear a mask if you don't have to. And don't forget, leave your phone at home tomorrow. Cheers.
Yeah. Bye bye.